You may wonder why, despite your gentleness, sincerity, and pure intentions, there are those who recoil from you as though you carry an invisible poison. You extend your hand with kindness, yet they draw back, their eyes narrowing, their hearts hardening. It is tempting to believe this is your fault, that you must reshape yourself to be loved. But the truth lies in a deeper realm of the human psyche, one far beneath the polite smiles and civil words people wear like masks. You may not realize it at first, but kindness is not always received with gratitude. In fact, there are moments when it feels almost like a curse, when you extend your warmth towards someone, only to be met with coldness, suspicion, or even quiet hostility. One of the deepest reasons for this lies in the nature of kindness itself. It acts like a mirror. When you treat people with genuine compassion, patience, and authenticity, you are holding up a reflection of what they could be, but perhaps are not. And for many, that reflection is too raw, too revealing. They may look into it and see the ways they have been unkind, the moments they failed to offer understanding, the times they chose self-interest over empathy. Without a word from you, they begin to feel judged, not because you have accused them, but because the truth they have avoided is now staring back at them. This mirror is not made of glass, it is made of energy, presence, and intention. It is silent but powerful. Imagine someone who has built their life around sharpness, cynicism, and guardedness. They have convinced themselves that the world rewards only the ruthless, that softness is a liability, that kindness is for the naive. Then you arrive without judgment, without any agenda except to connect and share goodwill. Your demeanor alone challenges the architecture of their worldview. Your very existence whispers the possibility that life can be navigated differently, that trust and openness are not always traps. But to accept that possibility would require them to admit that their own way of being might be flawed, incomplete, or even harmful. And so, rather than embrace what you represent, they push you away. The difficulty is that people rarely understand this process consciously. If you were to ask them why they seem uneasy around you, they would likely give surface-level answers. I just don't click with you, or something about you feels off. But beneath those vague explanations is a far more personal truth. They are uncomfortable with themselves in your presence. You have not insulted them, harmed them, or betrayed them. You have merely shown them a version of life where kindness is not weakness, but strength, and that is enough to disturb the carefully guarded stories they tell themselves. And it is not only individuals hardened by life who respond this way. Even those who pride themselves on being good people may find your kindness unsettling. For when they see how you act consistently, without the expectation of reward or recognition, it can remind them of their own inconsistencies. They might realize that their generosity comes with strings, or that their patience runs out when it is no longer convenient. Again, your presence becomes a mirror, one they cannot escape without stepping away from you entirely. It is important to understand that this rejection is not always personal. In many cases, you have become a symbol, not a person, in their mind. You symbolize the unfulfilled potential within them, the virtues they have abandoned or neglected. You symbolize the path they did not take, the risks they did not dare to embrace. The human psyche is a fragile balance of light and shadow, and when too much light is shone into certain corners, the instinctive reaction is to shield the eyes, even if that light could illuminate the way forward. This is why kindness, though universally praised in theory, is not universally loved in practice. Your sincerity can stir restlessness in those who would prefer to stay asleep to their deeper truths. The mirror you hold is not cruel, it simply tells the truth. But truth, for many, is an unwelcome guest. They will close the door to it, and to you without realizing that they are locking themselves away from the very thing that could set them free. There are times when your kindness does not feel like a mirror to someone's conscience, but rather like a sudden gust of wind that disturbs a carefully sealed room. People carry wounds far older than their current relationships, wounds from childhood betrayals, from friends who turned their backs, from lovers who used affection as a weapon. These wounds do not heal cleanly. They remain beneath the surface, tender to the touch, often ignored but never forgotten. When you approach them with sincere warmth, your kindness brushes against those old scars. When without intending to, you awaken what they have worked so hard to bury. They are not meeting you in the present moment. They are meeting you through a veil of memory, through the eyes of the person they once were when they were hurt. If someone has learned that affection always comes with a price, your generosity may trigger suspicion. If they have known love as a form of control, your care may be interpreted as a trap. If they have only experienced empathy in moments where it was used to extract something from them, your understanding will feel like a setup for eventual betrayal. This reaction does not mean your kindness is insincere. It means that their mind has been trained to recognize patterns of harm, and it is applying that old pattern to you without conscious thought. In this way, you are not really being rejected for who you are, but for the ghost you resemble. You are the echo of someone else's story, a story in which the ending was not kind at all. People who have lived through repeated disappointments often build intricate defenses to protect themselves. These defenses can take the shape of cynicism, mistrust, or emotional distance. When you arrive with kindness, you do not fit neatly into these defenses. In fact, you might threaten them. If they begin to believe that your care is genuine, they risk lowering their walls, and lowering those walls feels like opening the door to danger. The wound within them whispers, "It's safer to stay guarded. Don't believe this. Don't get close." And so they keep you at arm's length, convinced they are protecting themselves, even if what they are actually doing is refusing healing. The human psyche is built not only on what has happened to us, but on the meaning we give to those events. Someone whose life has been marked by betrayal might unconsciously decide that the safest way to live is to expect harm from everyone. This belief becomes a lens through which they view the world, filtering out evidence that contradicts it. Your kindness, then, is not seen for what it is. It is distorted by the lens, reframed as a performance, a prelude to manipulation, or a fleeting act that will vanish when it is no longer convenient for you. This is why you cannot always reach someone with goodness alone. They must first be willing to believe that goodness can exist without hidden motives, and that is a belief many are not ready to embrace. Until they are, your warmth will be uncomfortable to them, not because it is untrue, but because it is unfamiliar. The mind clings to what it knows, even if what it knows causes pain. It is important to remember that this is not a flaw in your kindness, nor is it a sign that you should harden yourself to match their suspicion. If anything, it is a reminder that trust is not built by offering kindness alone, but by understanding that some hearts have been closed for so long that the first knock at the door will not be welcomed. They may hear it and retreat further inside, afraid that opening up will invite danger. And yet, with patience, consistency, and respect for their pace, some of those doors may eventually open, not because you forced them, but because you remained steady in the face of their fear. There is a quiet misunderstanding that floats through the minds of many, that kindness is weakness, that compassion comes from fragility, and that gentleness is a sign of submission. At first glance, it is easy for people to place you in this category when you show patience or extend forgiveness. They may believe that your willingness to understand them means you are willing to be controlled by them, but sooner or later, they discover that your kindness is not born of fear or dependency. It is rooted in something far more unshakable. You are kind because you choose to be, not because you must be. And that realization unsettles people in ways they often cannot explain. True kindness, when genuine, is not a hollow shell. It is the product of inner solidity, of knowing who you are and what you stand for. This kind of kindness carries weight. It does not bend under manipulation. It does not crumble under pressure, and it does not change simply to win approval. This is where the trouble begins for some people. They expect kindness to be pliable, to surrender to their will, to smooth over every conflict in their favor. But when they meet someone whose kindness is paired with unwavering self-respect, they realize they cannot exploit it. And for those who rely on subtle dominance or control in relationships, this is deeply threatening. Your compassion is not a leash they can pull, it is a steady flame they cannot put out. And the nature of strength, when wrapped in kindness, confuses people who are used to power being loud, forceful, and aggressive. Your power does not roar, it simply exists, and that quiet confidence often speaks louder than their bluster. For insecure people, this kind of presence is intolerable because it exposes the hollowness of their own authority. They may feel, on some unspoken level, that you can see through them, not because you call them out, but because you are not swayed by their attempts to dominate. This dynamic can create a subtle resentment. They might accuse you of arrogance for holding to your boundaries, or they might interpret your refusal to be manipulated as a lack of empathy. In reality, you are simply protecting the foundation that allows you to be kind in the first place. Without that foundation, your generosity would be easily drained, your patience quickly exhausted, and your inner balance destroyed. People who depend on control often dislike this because it means they cannot make you orbit around them. What unsettles them most is that your kindness is a choice, not a need. You are not kind to avoid rejection. You are not kind to gain status. You are not kind because you fear the alternative. You are kind because it aligns with your values, and that makes it impossible for others to dictate when or how you express it. For those who measure power by how much they can influence others, meeting someone who operates outside of their influence feels like an affront to their sense of control. So they might distance themselves, speak ill of you, or quietly try to undermine you, not because you have wronged them, but because you have shown them a form of strength they cannot bend to their will. In their eyes, strength is supposed to look like dominance. In yours, it looks like self-mastery. And when the two collide, it becomes clear who is standing on solid ground and who is propped up by illusions. This is why some people cannot stand you even when you are kind. They cannot control you, and for them that means they cannot feel safe with you, not in the sense of emotional security, but in the sense of maintaining their unspoken hierarchy. Your kindness, paired with strength, breaks the unspoken rules they depend on. And when those rules crumble, some would rather turn away from you than question the very system that keeps them feeling powerful. Human beings are endlessly entangled in systems of comparison, spoken and unspoken hierarchies that determine where they believe they stand in relation to others. These hierarchies can be based on wealth, status, beauty, intelligence, influence, or even moral virtue. Many people unconsciously measure themselves against others to confirm their worth, finding comfort in knowing who is above and who is below. It gives them a sense of order in a chaotic world. But when someone like you steps into the picture, someone whose kindness is not motivated by competition, whose sense of self is not anchored in climbing these invisible ladders, you disrupt the very framework they rely upon to feel secure. You do not play the same game they do, and that alone makes you difficult to place in their mental order. If they cannot label you as higher or lower, they cannot predict how to treat you. They cannot figure out whether to envy you, pity you, admire you, or dismiss you. This uncertainty is deeply unsettling because it forces them to face a possibility they rarely consider, that the whole hierarchy they've built their identity around might be meaningless. And rather than wrestle with that discomfort, many will choose the easier path, pushing you away or diminishing you in whatever way they can. This is why some will mock your kindness or interpret it as weakness. To fit you into their hierarchy, they must make you smaller. If you operate outside their competitive structure, they risk realizing that status is a mirage, that there is another way to live that does not depend on winning over others. Your very presence hints at this alternative, and it threatens the foundation of their self-worth. They have invested so much energy into playing the game that the idea of walking away from it feels like erasing themselves. For others, the problem is that you strip away their excuses. If you can be both kind and self-assured without needing to prove superiority, it raises uncomfortable questions. Why are they so consumed with validation? Why do they chase approval as if it were survival itself? You are not competing with them, but your refusal to compete shines a light on their obsession with winning. In this light, their victories can begin to feel hollow, their status less meaningful. It is easier for them to ridicule you than to dismantle the very structure they have been climbing their whole lives. It is also worth noting that the rejection you face is sometimes subtle, cloaked in sarcasm, small acts of exclusion, or quiet resistance. They may not openly challenge you, but they will withhold genuine connection. They will keep you at a distance, not because they truly dislike you as a person, but because you unsettle their sense of place. If they get too close, they risk being drawn into your way of seeing the world, and that would mean letting go of the hierarchy they've built their identity upon. This is the paradox. Your lack of interest in power makes you powerful in a way they cannot control. You live in a reality where value is not determined by position, and to those who depend on position for self-worth, this feels dangerous. They may never articulate it, but deep down, they sense that you have something they cannot claim without dismantling their entire worldview. So they resist you. They reject the invitation your presence extends, a life not driven by endless comparison, a life where kindness is not a strategy, but a way of being. And in turning away, they protect their fragile place in the order they know, even if it means closing themselves off from something truer, freer, and far more real. There are moments when kindness does not merely reflect someone's shortcomings or disrupt their sense of order, it confronts them with the weight of their own guilt. When you treat someone with patience and compassion, especially if they have treated you poorly in the past, you leave them with no shield, no excuse, no justification for their actions. Your behavior does not match the script they had prepared in their mind, the one where you would retaliate, withdraw, or respond in kind to their hostility. Instead, you remain calm, composed, even gracious. And in that moment, the full truth of their behavior becomes visible to them, not because you have accused them, but because you have given them nothing to hide behind. This is one of the most disarming effects of kindness. It removes the convenient narratives people use to protect themselves from their own conscience. If they had convinced themselves that you were difficult, unworthy, or cold, their treatment of you could be justified in their own mind. But when you respond to cruelty with steadiness, their story begins to unravel. Now they must confront the uncomfortable possibility that their actions say more about them than about you. And for many, this is too heavy a truth to bear. The human psyche does not easily welcome guilt. Guilt forces a person to see the gap between who they believe they are and what they have actually done. To close that gap requires humility, self-reflection, and change, qualities that not everyone is ready to cultivate. For some, it is far easier to reject the person who makes them feel guilty than to change the behavior that caused the guilt in the first place. By keeping you at a distance, they can quiet the inner voice that whispers about their failures. This rejection can be subtle or overt. Sometimes they will withdraw from you gradually, avoiding eye contact, shortening conversations, or reducing contact altogether. Other times they may attack you verbally, picking at your character, questioning your motives, or accusing you of insincerity. These attacks are not truly about you. They are about defending themselves from the discomfort you evoke. The mind is remarkably skilled at turning an inner conflict into an outer one, projecting its unease onto the person who triggered it. The irony is that you did not set out to make them feel guilty. Your intention was never to expose them or hold their wrongs against them, but kindness has a way of holding up an unflinching light, even when it is extended gently. And for those who have acted unjustly, that light can feel like condemnation, even if you offer it without judgment. This is why forgiveness is so powerful and so feared. True forgiveness strips away the tension of open conflict, but it also eliminates the shield of mutual wrongdoing. If you forgive someone who has wronged you, they can no longer point to your retaliation as proof that you are just as flawed as they are. They are left standing alone with their actions, with no one else to share the blame. For some, that is unbearable. And so, they avoid you. They choose distance over the possibility of transformation, because distance feels safer than standing in the glow of your integrity. In this way, your kindness becomes both a gift and a mirror, one they may not be ready to look into. This is not a reflection of your worth, but of the battles they are still unwilling to fight within themselves. There is a deeper layer to this entire pattern, one that sits beneath guilt, beneath competition, beneath the unease of being mirrored. It is the quiet, unspoken reality that some people will reject you simply because your life reminds them of what they could be, but have chosen not to become. Your way of being, your calm, your empathy, your refusal to betray your own values, stands as living proof that another path exists, and that truth alone can be unbearable for those who have settled into bitterness, cynicism, or resignation. When someone has built their identity on the belief that life is harsh and people are selfish, meeting a person who genuinely lives otherwise is like staring at a crack in the wall of their prison. That crack reveals that the world outside still exists, that it always did, and that the walls were not inevitable but chosen, brick by brick, through years of fear and mistrust. But to admit that would mean admitting they could have chosen differently. It would mean confronting the wasted years, the missed opportunities for connection, the moments they turned away from love because they believed it would only hurt them. For many, it is easier to stay inside the prison and pretend that the outside is not real. You, in this sense, become a threat, not because of anything you say or do, but simply because you embody possibility. You are living evidence that cynicism is not the only way to survive. You are proof that a person can be both aware of the world's darkness and still choose to act from light. For someone who has built their self-image on rejecting such ideals as naive, your very existence feels like a contradiction. They cannot reconcile. They cannot dismiss you without also dismissing the truth you represent. So instead, they reject you personally. Sometimes, this rejection will be wrapped in mockery. They may call you unrealistic, accuse you of living in a fantasy, or frame your kindness as ignorance. Other times, it will take the form of cold distance, an invisible wall designed to keep your influence from seeping into their lives. These defenses are not truly about you. They are about protecting the fragile structure of the worldview they have constructed. To let you close would be to risk dismantling it entirely. The irony is that many of these same people are drawn to you, at least initially. Something in them recognizes the peace you carry, the groundedness in your actions, the steadiness in your choices. They may admire it in secret, even long for it, but admiration can quickly turn to resentment when they realize that possessing such qualities would require them to change, not in surface habits, but at the very core of who they are. And transformation, real transformation, demands a level of self-honesty that is terrifying to those who have built their lives around avoiding it. So they stand at a distance, sometimes throwing stones, sometimes pretending not to see you at all. What they are truly avoiding is not you, it is the version of themselves they could become if they surrendered to what you represent. They are avoiding the work, the vulnerability, the surrender required to step into that light. And in doing so, they forfeit the very freedom they claim to want. You must understand this. Their rejection is not proof that you are wrong to live as you do. It is proof that you have chosen a path that requires courage. And courage is a mirror in which many see their own absence of it. You will not be welcomed everywhere, but that does not mean you should dim your presence. Keep walking with your kindness intact, not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as a compass. For the ones who are ready, your life will not be a threat, it will be an invitation. And when they accept it, they will finally see that the crack in the wall was never meant to be feared, it was meant to be walked through.